Hey guys, Torcus here. So, the Empires of the Ascended expansion is releasing tomorrow, Wednesday, and I have been so excited to try it out. I have honestly not been able to sleep because I've been too hyped. As someone who's very passionate about deck building and that aspect of card games, and especially of Runeterra, I haven't been able to keep my mind from just thinking of all the different deck ideas and concepts and stuff to try out, and because of that, I have ended up with 25 theory-crafted deck lists. This is by no means exhaustive of every possible strategy you can build. There are so many more ideas that I haven't even touched on here, but I'm fairly certain I have at least done one deck for every new champion, probably more than one, without a doubt. So I'm going to quickly go through my deck lists. We're going to give a little overview of each of them, and you can get an impression of all the different stuff. They're very varied in strategies, some of them more similar than others, but there is a lot of cool things here, and I am going to have a hard time deciding what to play first tomorrow, but that is all the more exciting. So I'm going to break these down by champion so we can cover everything, and that way we can see all of the different champions that are going to be coming into the new expansion in their own kind of spot, and then we'll kind of hop around from there. I'm going to start with Renekton because I know you guys probably think Renekton's a bit vanilla. He's just like an Overwhelm guy. But I love Overwhelm, and I kind of love that archetype. So we're going to look at some Renekton decks first. This is a Renekton Darius deck. I got some Maokai Reapers here and Blade Squire. We've got lots of vulnerable triggers with the exhaust. And we've got Ruthless Predator as well. I've got a couple Whirling Deaths to make sure that we can level up the Renekton that way, and is also a good way to get rid of blockers when you're trying to do Overwhelm stuff. I got a Farron on the top end. We've got like Ruin Runner, which is a super big new Overwhelm unit that's going to be putting a lot of work in Shurima, I think. And yeah, quite a few 1-drops. I got the Legion Drummer in here because I figured if we're doing vulnerable, I think the synergy is definitely there for you to be able to give quick attack to something and then use the vulnerable so that you won't end up taking any damage in the trade. You can get some very favorable trades that way. And yeah, that's basically what we got here. The game plan is just, go hard, go fast. Get good trades using your vulnerables, try to level the Renekton as quickly as possible, try to level the Darius as quickly as possible, and try to kill your opponent as quickly as possible. So this one is Renekton Misfortune. I figured another one of the good regions for vulnerable is Bilgewater. So with Bilgewater, you can use stuff like Shakedown, which gives us multiple vulnerable procs. It's not super easy to trigger just because you might not always have something with enough health to use it on, and it might not, you might not actually want to. But I have this one Dune Keeper just because you can sometimes play Dune Keeper and then play Shakedown, and then you munch the Sand Soldier. And that's a pretty cool combo there. Not always how it's going to go down, but I'm hoping that that's at least a considerable thing. But you're going to find plenty of other times to use it where you just like hit your like Island Navigator or something and then put some other stuff into it. Especially if you hit like Ruin Runner, you're probably not going to care too much if you hit your Shakedown on it. But it does help in situations where you need to take out a few things at once. But yeah, we got Butcher and Maokai Reaper. We got a couple Hourglasses just to make sure that the Misfortune doesn't die, because it would be very preferable that we get her to level up. We got Hired Gun as another way to get vulnerable on them. Also, we put in 2 Ye Be Warned in addition to the 2 exhausts. I figured Ye Be Warned might be better in some situations and exhaust would be better in other situations. This one helps make it an easier favorable trade and you can do it immediately, whereas Ye Be Warned can help us get through the deck more quickly and still does the vulnerable, which that extra value on top of it might be relevant in some situations for sure. We got Croaker so we can get some draw in here, and we definitely have some scouts with the Navigator and the Razor Scale Hunter, which gives the extra benefit of also giving vulnerable at the same time as giving the scout. So extra attacks, Renekton getting to attack multiple times a turn is a really big damage push, and having Misfortune do the clear before the overwhelm means that you get extra damage onto the face because their health is being removed, and every extra damage will go straight through to the Nexus. So we have the Ruin Runner and Renekton as our overwhelm units. Really, really excited about this one. I think Misfortune and Renekton actually have a decent amount of synergy just because of all this Bilgewater vulnerable synergy that we have here. So these next 2 are Sundisk decks. These are the 2 Sundisk decks that I made. I only made the 2 of them. This one is kind of all in on the Sundisk going off as quickly as possible. Basically, we have 2 Azirs, we have 3 Renektons, and we have 1 Nasus. I figured that you want 3 Renektons just because the Renekton is the one that's going to have the most trouble leveling if you don't get this Ascended's Rise to go off. But we are pretty all in on this Ascended's Rise. That is kind of how we're going to do the thing. And the Buried Sundisk, when it turns into a Restored Sundisk, it'll pull a Nasus in addition to an extra copy of each of the other ones. So the Nasus isn't really expected to be played until he's level 3. Other than that, we do have right for making sure we get our champions. We have the 1 Sundisk, obviously. We got Preparations and Chronomancer to predict so we increase our consistency, because you really do want to play Azir on 3, Renekton on 4, and Ascended Rise on 5. If you have 2 spell mana open, that's entirely possible. You might not be able to do all that just because your opponent's going to be doing some sort of pressure. You might have to play around a few things, but we do have the Hourglass for protection, and we have Rite of Negation, because this is the only way to stop them from removing your Sundisk. If they go for landmark removal, you play this. You have to keep that in mind. If they're going to remove your Sundisk, you have to have this ready. And normally after they try once, they shouldn't have a second one in hand. Hopefully. You never know, though. The rest of it is just defensive stuff. We got Spirit Fire to keep us in the game. We've got 3 Quicksands, and we've got Kihiri, which is normally going to get the +1/+1, as well as Rockhopper. They're both just kind of bodies that keep you from dying too quickly. Alright, so that's that one. I have quite a bit of confidence that this is actually going to work out this way. But keep in mind, all of these decks, I'm probably going to be changing them after I try them out, see what's working and what's not working. But I feel like this whole all-in Ascended's Rise, now that we have Rite of Negation, is pretty solid. So here is the other Buried Sundisk deck. It is quite a bit different from the Ascended's Rise idea. This one is basically all in on the leveling them naturally. Azir is getting lots of support from this because we are running all kinds of Sandstoller stuff, including Dunekeeper, and we've got the Sandcrafter. The Golden Ambassador is here to pull the things. This makes more sense in this archetype, whereas the other one we didn't really want to be spending turn 4 playing this. We wanted to already have Renekton in hand in that one. But this one you're definitely going to be pretty happy to play this and pull your champions out of your deck and get those extra stats. We got the Darius. We still have a Chronomancer in here just because I really did want to have a 2-drop, and there's actually only 2-2-drops in the region, so not a lot of options there. Still have the Hourglass just to hope that we get through that, and we have 2 Rites of Negation. And Voice of the Risen as well, because this does go off a lot with Azir, I'd imagine, since summoning 10 units doesn't seem very hard. I think he's going to be one of the easier champions in the game to level, so having this with the synergy with the Sand Soldier is going to be very good. And yeah, we got like a little bit of vulnerable support. This works really well with Sand Soldiers, so that's why I wanted to have more of that than Exhaust in this case. But it shouldn't be too hard to level the Renekton, and the Azir's like obvious, super easy level up on that idea. So another cool idea for Sundisk. And the last Renekton deck we have is Renekton Jarvan. I think they have quite a bit of synergy there, especially with Cataclysm being a way to get a challenge off on Renekton, who then is going to get his buff when he challenges things. We are doing a mostly elite package. The Penitent Squire should pretty easily be able to behold what it needs to with the amount of elites we have. And we're getting stuff that gives us a lot of challenger synergy with the Honored Lord and the Gallant Rider. We're running Grand Plaza because basically everything in this deck is happy to have challenger. I've got Green Fang Warden, which I mostly have because it's a scout, and it does have good synergy with the Grand Plaza. The scouts have a lot of synergy with Jarvan just because you can open attack with the scout and then instantly summon the Jarvan during that attack, and the Jarvan still gets another attack that way. Similar reason why we have the Great Horn Companion there as well. You know, we got the Blinding Assault for another scout too, so there's quite a few scouts. The Green Fang might end up feeling pretty crap if we can't end up triggering any sort of challenger, but there should be a very high chance of it triggering between the Squire, the Ruthless Predator, all that stuff. So I think it's got a pretty good chance of that working out. I think this will be quite a strong archetype. I have a lot of confidence in Jarvan's strength. We did end up not running like Cytheria and stuff, but once I try it out and see how it plays out, we might want to put some of that stuff back in. Just right now, it's really going into the whole getting mega value off of Jarvan and Challenger type things. Okay, so piggybacking off of the Sundisk idea, we have more Azir. I have 2 more Azir lists that I came up with. One is for Ionia and one is for Shadow Isles. Both of them are getting some decent ephemeral wideboard type synergy. So this one, we've got, you know, your typical Sand Soldier cards that we had in the other lists. This one's got Shape Stone because the stats will definitely matter a lot in this deck, and the Emperor's Dais is going to come down on 2 a lot. So, you know, maybe not every game we find it immediately, but you're not going to hate this too badly if you don't trigger it, and it should trigger pretty consistently. I've got Sparring Student because this is going to grow with all of the Sand Soldiers. I think that will be worth in pretty much every turn in the grand scheme of things. If you have like a Darius and a Azir on the board at the same time, this will be a 3-3 on attack, and you can certainly pull off even more than that without too much trouble. Green Glade also having similar synergies on that front. We got like I tried to include a decent amount of spells because we do have Field Musicians. This is the main reason to go into this archetype, because we do want to get that card draw and that refill on the spell mana. And this will definitely trigger all the time if you do run Sand Soldiers like we are. We've got Homecoming. Homecoming is actually quite strong, I think. People have been underrating it for a little bit, and in any deck where you run a lot of landmarks, the idea that, you know, sometimes people think you can't really justify playing this if they remove the unit that you're recalling, then you lose the recall on their unit and it fizzles out. But if you really need to be in a pinch, we can bounce our Darius. It's only a 2-mana reinvestment, and it's basically a guarantee to get the recall off. So it ends up being like kind of a 6-mana Will of Ionia in that case if you have to end up playing the Darius again later. But in other cases, you can still use this to save your own unit and get extra value and everything. So this definitely good for being in a defensive position. You can get through that way, and it has great synergy with Concussive Palm because you bounce their unit and you can get a Concussive Palm back in your hand. We'll be making lots of use of this refunded spell mana. And beyond that, yeah, it's all the same sort of stuff you'd have in the other Azir lists. We also have Zed, which, you know, covers a lot of the same ground that Azir does. Also summoning units and stuff. Decently easy to level as well to make this Voice of the Risen have some good stuff. And if this does trigger and you have Zed, then he's already at 5 attack without being leveled, and that is pretty sweet. And our other Azir list is a Azir Hecarim deck. There is some Bark Beasts up here, easily triggering off of the Sand Soldiers dying without having to trade out anything else. We got a couple of Shape Stones again, always running Hourglass because it is very solid. Glimpse Beyond, we got Shark Chariots to really go in and get lots of extra damage out of the Sand Soldier summonings. Man, there's so much alliteration with Sand Soldiers. But yeah, it's an extra 3 to 4 damage, maybe even more than that if you've got other buffs going on with the onboard effects. Stalking Shadows can give us extra copies of these types of things, like extra Dune Keeper, extra Shark Chariot, very solid. We got the one of Rite of Negation, super decent when you can use it on Sand Soldiers. And we have Neverglade Collector, so we can turn our Sand Soldiers into healing as well as more face damage to even get closer to killing our opponents. 3 copies of that. As long as it doesn't die, you're in a good spot with that. And these days, there's not too many things killing Neverglades very quickly. And then Hecarim is our big bomb that comes down and buffs all of the 1/1s, as well as, you know, summoning even more Ephemerals. So it's a super strong win condition in the deck. Even stronger than all this Azir and everything like that. Here we have another Jarvan deck. I did only have one other Jarvan deck that I ended up building. This is a full-on elite deck with Garen, as well as, you know, we got the Cythrias, pretty standard. I got one For the Fallen because I don't get super hyped about For the Fallen, especially when you're running Plaza. It's already taking up a board slot, and you're not going to be ever having 5 or more than 5 off of it, guaranteed. And there's just times where you draw it at the wrong time, and it just feels really awkward. It's better off just being a one of, and but as a one of, it can definitely do some really sick stuff. We do have Battlesmith and Honored Lord. We run Succession, which you can use the spell mana to pair with the Grand Plaza. But yeah, the rest of it, you know, we got the Allegiance, 100% chance to hit. These are all Demacia cards. And Vanguard Squire getting cheap off of everything. This is one of the lists that I'm more questioning on. I'm not entirely sure if I'm super solid on exactly where it is right now. But always open to changing them once I've given them a spin, and that is definitely going to be happening on the days that I try these out. We're going to be trying these out for a long time still, though, if I've got 25 decks. The next champ I want to look at is Lissandra. Lissandra is one of the more exciting champions, without a doubt. I know everyone has been pretty hyped to see how this will play out with the Watcher and so forth. This one is a hard control, going straight for the combo to end the game as quickly as possible once you do get your Watcher online. So we have 3 Fading Memories that we will be planning on using those on the Ice Pillar from Trundle. So we play the Trundle at some point before turn 8, and then we play as many Ice Pillars as we can. All of them being effectively free because they refill your mana. And as long as Lissandra is on the board the turn before, or even we can play her right after, it's not really a big deal. Then she'll level up and we'll get our Watcher in hand. Once the Watcher is in hand, we can play Spectral Matron, which not only is an 8 cost towards giving us a free Watcher, it is also able to summon the Watcher from our hand, which means that even if our opponent has stuns or vengeance or any sort of removal or ways to stall out our Watcher and make sure that it can't end the game, this gives us an extra chance. So you can play it with this and then still have an extra Watcher and even another Spectral Matron. Maybe you get to pull off that as well, and that way you get lots of chances. Your opponent's going to have a ton of answers to make sure that doesn't happen, and it's going to be really hard for them to make that end up working out for them at that point. The amount of investment that they're putting into just not dying by then would mean that you're probably going to be able to win at some point off of that. So yeah, beyond that, the rest of it is kind of just support. We've got 2 entreats to make sure we find the Lissandras and the Trundles. Some draw off the Sentry, the stalling with the bodies with the Aristocrat, healing on the Tavern Keeper, Vile Feast, all this stuff. Pretty standard stuff, just some catalysts to ramp and heal at the same time. And we have the new Blighted Ravine as a kind of semi-similar to Avalanche, but has a few different applications in that it does negate open attacks, whereas Avalanche is better against development. So we get both niches on that. And yeah, I think this is going to go off pretty consistently. If it doesn't, I'm going to make sure that we can work on it until it does. But you know that the game's going to end instantly once that Watcher happens, and I'm excited to try this for sure. This is another Lissandra deck. This is a Taliyah Lissandra deck. Very, very different concept for this one. This one, the Lissandra is, instead of being the main focus, Lissandra is a support card for the Taliyah being the main focus of the deck. I decided not to go with the Frozen Thralls in the other deck, but this deck we are going all in on Frozen Thralls and all the other potential landmarks that we can work with that. Here you can duplicate Frozen Thralls, you can put Promising Future on Frozen Thralls, and then duplicate them, thereby making gigantic boards if you combine it with Taliyah and you combine it with Draklorn Inquisitor, who will finish their countdowns early and make sure that you get that gigantic payoff. We also have both of these cards summoning Frozen Thralls that have a very long cooldown from that point in time. Getting a Frozen Thrall on 5 is not likely to finish during that game, nor is the Lissandra even, because at that point it's still turn 11. The Draklorn Inquisitor helps you get there faster, but you're still putting it to like turn 7, 8 at that point. That is why the Desert Naturalist can turn your useless Frozen Thralls into instant tempo. We are super happy to run this, not just for that, but also with the flexibility of being able to destroy our opponent's landmarks, but being able to get a Grumpy Rock Bear off of these landmarks that you're never gonna end up using is super, super good. We got the one Rite of Negation because that's always nice, but it's pretty, it's a pretty tight list. We've got triple Hourglass, so we can potentially do some shenanigans with duplications of champions, and the rest of them are pretty obvious landmarks. The Preparations, the Rock Bear, the Preservarium, all very solid, and we got Rock Hopper, so we get a body that gives us a landmark towards leveling Taliyah with that as well as Tavern Keepers to keep us alive, and Psy Scout to give us that elusive while also predicting some landmarks. And then for Taliyah, this is another take on how we can implement her. That one kind of leveraging the power of Frozen Thralls to try and be our big win condition. This one is pretty hard into using Taliyah as the all-in win condition. As far as I'm aware, they have not changed anything about how the stack works yet. So doing Dawn and Dusk with Taliyah does give you a full stack on of whatever her skill is when she's attacking. As long as she's leveled, she's putting down 3 each time when she does have a landmark on board. That leaves you with 9 from 3 Taliyahs. So Dawn and Dusk into onto your Taliyah is basically going to make your opponent unable to react outside of burst spells, which is super, super strong. We have Hourglasses, again, of course, and Notify and Deny to keep us in the game, stopping our opponent from doing things. We got Homecoming, which can get really useful off of all of these cheap landmarks that you can do, as well as the Concussive Palm. And we've got Claws of the Dragon, so that when we are casting some spells, you can get some bodies on the board for free, which is pretty nice. But yeah, and Tasty Faith Oak for some healing. Outside of that, it's pretty typical. You know, we got 2 Naturalists in this one just because we don't have the whole eating Lissandra stuff synergy. But you will sometimes want to use this on like the Rock Hoppers, Roiling Sands, and in other cases you can remove your opponent's landmarks, which is definitely what we will be excited to do. So piggybacking off of the Ionia decks that we've seen, I have 2 more Ionia decks that I built. This one is a Field Musicians Ephemeral deck. We had the Azir one earlier, but this one is using Kalista and Hecarim. So basically we're going to be consistently triggering Field Musicians off of Haunted Relics, as well as having Blighted Caretaker, and then the Shark Chariots are going to come in once in a while. It's using a lot of spells, but we're going to be using some of these spells to trigger more summons, and there's definitely a lot of synergy with spells off of this so that you can keep playing more of them because you did get your spell mana back. We normally want to be spending our spell mana before we summon everything so that we get it back immediately. Got a Notify and Deny to make sure our opponent's not doing too many things. The Stalking Shadows gives us more copies of these important cards like Shark Chariot, and we also have Mask Mother combined with Darkwater Scourge so that you can get a very early 5 mana 7/7 lifesteal. Well, I guess it's not that early, but turn 5 you can get a 7/7 lifesteal. It does not keep the Ephemeral, so that's not a problem. And that puts the Scourge in the pool for the Kalista if the Kalista levels up, which hopefully with the Haunted Relic that can be a thing that can happen. Just have the Palm for some protection, and Hecarim as well as Harrowing for our big finishing power. Still not exactly sure how much we're going to be getting out of this Field Musicians, how much you should build the deck around spells for it. But this is definitely my first take on it, and I think it will be pretty sweet. And this last Ionia deck is an Encroaching Shadows combo. We've tried this kind of thing in the past, or some people have. This one gets a lot stronger because we always had the Blade Scout. Now we basically have another copy of Blade Scout in some form with the Shadow Apprentice. Once you have the Encroaching Shadows down, you will be able to make these into 4 attack units with Elusive. And if you get extra copies of them off of Stalking Shadows, you also have Keeper of the Masks and then Green Glade. All of these will be ready, and you play them all at once, and you get a huge burst of damage on that turn. And you can end your opponent with that. We are doing the same idea with the Mask Mother and the Darkwater Scourge here to try and keep us in the game with some lifesteal. We also have Doom Beast, a way to push damage as well as healing at the same time. And then a little bit of Withering Wail and Concussive Palm to keep us going so that we can live until we get the combo activated. I'm only running 2 Encroaching Shadows. I don't think that we're going to miss it too often, but it's entirely possible. We still have the 3 glimpses, so hopefully that's enough to be able to find at least 1 copy of this. You don't really want to find too many of them because the amount of mana you have to spend and the amount of time you actually have to survive. Normally you can't spend all 8 mana on 2, but if you really need to, you do have that option. But the Mask Mother has some flexibility, doesn't always have to hit the Scourge, but that is the biggest thing about it. And the Scourge, even without the Mask Mother, is some healing. And we also have Zed, which on his own, he can just push some damage, and if you do get the Encroaching Shadows on him, he can be a pretty big, a little bit bigger of a damage threat, even if he isn't necessarily part of the combo. He can sometimes help in a pinch, and he puts more pressure on your opponent to try and end up chump blocking him and stuff, so you don't have to be blocking all their units anymore, which is nice there too. Transitioning into our remaining Shadow Oz lists, this is a new take on Fearsome Aggro. It is still a Allegiance deck for Shadow Isles, so you do have the Mist Wraith off of the Wraith Collar, but we are running exactly 6 cards from Shurima in this deck. We've got 2 Raz Bloodmains, which can potentially come down and be a big threat that makes all of your Fearsomes more likely to be able to end the game off of it. You can do an open attack after developing this the turn before, and your opponent will have to have pretty big units to stop your Fearsome attack. We have 1 Spirit Fire, which is also doing the same idea, but it is a burst speed effect that you can do right as you're going in for your open attack. Super helpful in getting your Fearsomes to be going through without blocks. And we have this new sick 1-drop, which is Maokai Reaper, Fearsome, and it will grow quite a bit as the game goes on. If your opponent continues to block your units, he will eventually get very large as long as he's still on board. We have the 1 Mark of the Isles for some extra damage, but otherwise it is pretty much all typical Fearsome stuff that you'd expect to see. You know, Skitterer, we got the Doom Beast for some finishing power with that. We got 1 of on the Harrowing to try and end it on that as well. If you did have a Blood Main and you get it back on the Harrowing, that's pretty nice, as well as triggering Skitterer Summoner effects. So I think this is a pretty solid new take on the Fearsome archetype. We've seen a few different takes at this point, but I think some of this stuff will make ending the game very much more likely in some matchups where it's been difficult in the past. This deck is Turbo Maokai. So in the past, it's been pretty much guaranteed that if you're playing Maokai, you have to play with Nautilus. In this list, Nautilus is not necessary. We are going to try and finish the Maokai level up as fast as possible. And then after that, your opponent's deck will be gone, and you should win the game pretty quick after that. So basically everything in the deck is surrounding that. The new Sea Scarab is the main engine for this. That's the main reason why we're doing this. We're running 3 Haunted Relics for that purpose. If you have your Sea Scarab on board, you can play the Haunted Relic, giving you 3 blockers that turn, and that will be 3 tosses for you. He's pretty squishy at the 1-2 stat line. But if your opponent ends up burning removal on it, you won't feel too bad in that situation. It's only a 2-mana card, and even when he dies, you're still getting 1 toss. But you should be able to pull off more than a usual unit's amount of tosses on it if you play it properly. We also have Thorny Toad and Deadbloom Wanderer, which is what you'd expect. And Caretaker has a similar situation that the Relic does in being able to do a triple or quadruple toss off of that. Fading Memories for giving us extra copies of these core cards. We have Slaughter Docks to get the constant tossing. Maokai's obviously going to be tossing if he's on board. And we have Thresh to make sure that we can pull the Maokai, and he's also pretty good at clearing out some threats on board as you're going along. And then, a Whale and a Ruination to keep us in the game if we are starting to fall behind. So it's got the Go Hard as well to make sure that when you do lose your deck, if you still have at least 1 Go Hard in your hand, you can put cards back in so that you won't be at any threat of milling out. Even though your champions should be able to stop that, because you can't toss champions. This is just in case, and it's also able to snowball in power as the game goes on if you somehow manage to not win quickly enough in that endgame situation by the time all of the cards are gone in your opponent's deck. Here we have Kindred Nasus with Undying. I know this is something a lot of people have been excited to try out. The Undying is going to be very core to this deck. We've got the Kindred and the Nasus both having lots of Slay synergy. We've got double Ruination because the Undying's not going to care too much about that. And it's a good way to swing the board back in our favor after we've been falling behind. We've got 2 Rites of Negation. Easy triggers if you're eating your Undying with this, because then you're getting a deny and triggering your Undying, which is something you already want to do. We have Mask Mothers, which work great with Undying, and Song of the Isles, which works great there as well to give us some extra health. And if you combine these 2 cards, then the Mask Mother will get the lifesteal and not be affected by the Ephemeral. And 2 Hourglasses to make sure our Kindred and our Nasus don't get blown out by any sort of removal. 2 Hapless Aristocrat just to keep us in the game, and 1 Right to grab our important champions, as well as Chroniclers of Ruin to duplicate our Undyings and keep that going. Atrocity is our win condition in this deck. If your Nasus is big enough, you can just go in on the Atrocity, and he should be unkillable at that point if he's already leveled up. Since you've got Spell Shield, it will take quite a bit of work on your opponent's part to make sure that he doesn't end up just straight up finishing it from that position. I think this will be a pretty consistent archetype as long as you don't have too much trouble finding your Undying. which, sometimes might be a problem. But in most situations, you should be able to stall at least a little bit up until that point. But, yeah, I think it'll be a very cool archetype. I think this is something that a lot of people are hopping onto very early. And if you want to try this list, you are free to do so. So here we have my take on Timeline OTK. I know that we have Kindred and Vi. Maybe questionable whether we need both of them, but typically Vi is in these sort of decks, and I know Kindred has a lot of synergy here to make that work. But I decided that having both of them might be a good idea, just to make sure that all of your opponent's big threats get dealt with relative ease. We have Production Surge to keep us on the board when we need extra blockers. We got lots of removal and such. We've got 2 concurrent timelines. This is the most important card in the deck because you will play your Ledros, and then you will turn it into a Dreadway for instant OTK because it will double the effect of the play effect that is generally doing half of their health. It will be doing 100% of their health. Even if you miss, you can still have 3 more copies of your Ledros, or 2 more copies of your Ledros, so it's not a huge problem. And even then, you're dealing quite a lot of damage. The rest is just your typical control stuff, keeping you in the game, removing things. There's definitely going to be some changes based on what the meta is going to look like, I'm sure. The amount of every card in here is very open for debate. We have the Ballistic Bot and the Urchin to make sure we draw through the deck, as well as the Glimpse Beyond. Because we really do need to see the Ledros by turn 9, and we definitely need to have the concurrent timelines before that as well. If you don't get those on turn 9, the power level of the deck is going to go down. But, I mean, even then, you should be able to keep alive for a little bit, even in those situations. But it is basically 100% confirmed OTK on turn 9. So I can't imagine that not being strong. As long as we iron out exactly what you need to make it through the early turns, there shouldn't be any problem with that being a very top-tier deck. And here is my Immortal Lamb's Respite deck. This is a super meme deck. Don't expect this to do anything crazy, but I really wanted to make Lamb's Respite work with Out of the Way, and this is what I came up with. We've got a couple of Solari Soldiers and Shield Bearers, which get some extra value off of Out of the Way later in the game if that happens. They also work with Mask Mother because you can solidify the stats permanently on the Mask Mother, even if they are temporary on the initial body, which is super cool. It's another deck where Dark Water and Mask Mother are going to work out really well together. But the main thing here is if you can make it happen, Out of the Way on 3, and then Dark Water and Lamb's Respite on 4, is a Immortal Darkwater Scourge that cannot die, which is totally insane. Hitting the Zoe as well is super sweet, because then the Zoe is definitely going to be able to level up, and you get a infinite value engine elusive unit, which is super sweet. We're running Taric as well, just because I wasn't entirely sure what else to run for our champion. He does get a little bit out of his power using Pale Cascade as well as the Vigor there, and we have Bastions to make sure that when we are going for the Lamb's Respite, we should be able to protect them if we've saved up enough mana before they try to remove the Zoe or whatever else is going invulnerable. And when Taric levels up, he can also give people infinite invulnerability with the power of Out of the Way that way too. Sunforger is also here for some lifesteal. There's lots and lots of lifesteal in this deck, so dying hopefully shouldn't be a problem. We should be able to heal on a regular basis and it's another thing that does get some extra thing out of the way because it becomes permanent lifesteal on the Sunforger, making it a very, very strong unit in that case. Alright, so only a few decks left to go through. This one is a Sivir deck with Gangplank. This was basically designed to use the power of kegs combined with Ricochet to really get some huge damage, because each keg does add 5 damage to this, since each of the ticks is getting 1 extra on top of it. With more powder or anything like that is going to do a lot, and if your opponent doesn't do anything about that, it's going to be really, really sweet. We do have a little bit to make sure that we get our reputation off with the Sand Spinner, Sivir herself, Gangplank, and the Ruin Runner, all being able to deal 5 damage. Not super quickly, because they are coming down at turn 4+, but the whole Ricochet thing can be pulled off. Even at 6 mana, it'll be pretty sweet. And later on, it'll get stronger and stronger. We have the one Dreadway, which makes all of this even more damage output, not to mention with the Overwhelm guys that we have of Gangplank and Ruin Runner, they can just go straight through with the Overwhelm damage with the Dreadway. And the rest of it, we've got some sick 1-drops with the Butcher and the Maokai Reaper, which should be able to do some fun stuff. We got Croaker for some draw, Deckhand with more kegs. We got Inner Sanctum, which should give us some sick keywords that we can use with leveled up Sivir, which shouldn't take too long to get going. Make It Rain, doing another option for getting a lot out of our kegs. And Petty Officer, another keg card. And Citrus Courier, letting us do multiple attacks in some situations, which is super good with Sivir. And her giving everyone quick attack at base, as well as Spell Shield if it hasn't been broken. And sometimes using some Lucky Finds with her as well. It's going to mean that all those keywords are getting to attack 2 times with the Citrus Courier. Very, very cool. Here we have Sivir LeBlanc. This is kind of the archetype they were pushing with the, reputation cards. I didn't end up running a ton of reputation cards in here, honestly, but we do get the payoff with Whispered Words as well as the Inner Sanctum again in this one. We have the 2 1-drops here in Legion Saboteur and Blade Squire. Blade Squire giving us some cool blade fragments that can help a lot with getting extra value out of your 5-attack units. And the rest of them are all 5-attack, hopeful at least should be, with the 1-drops on board beforehand. Glory Seeker is there, Trifarian, Reckless Trifarian, and the Sand Spinner, which I ended up putting in a few decks, honestly. Bloody Business giving us a way to strike some things, helping both the LeBlanc and the Sivir level up that way. Kato and Ruin Runner giving us that bonus Overwhelm potential. And 2 Reckonings so that we can totally blow out our opponent's boards when we have all of these 5-attack plus things that will not be dying to it, which is super sweet. The LeBlanc, I've definitely felt like LeBlanc is not going to be particularly strong, most likely, if she is just 2 health. This is not a deck that's going to be able to protect her at all, really. But if she does get to hit, then that's great. It does work towards reputation. It does work towards leveling her as well as the Sivir. And if we do get her full payoff of her leveled up mirror image condition, you get a lot of value off of that with the cards that we do have in the deck. This one is our last Sivir deck. It is a Xenotype Researchers deck. I really want to just have an excuse to run Destiny's Call and Stellacorn in a deck, because that was just something that came to my mind. Building a deck around that kind of ended up being a little bit of a mess, but the idea is we're running researchers and stuff that benefits really well from it, being Zoe, Sivir, Ruin Runner, and Sparklefly. They are all cards that either have Elusive or Spell Shield. Oh yeah, and the Stellacorn, of course, also has Spell Shield. And a lot of them have Lifesteal as well. And this one even has Overwhelm, which is really good way to push some damage with that. Basically, the rest of it's just, Hourglass for protection, as well as maybe even re-triggering Researchers. Again, you get the summon effect twice. And then lots of ways to keep ourselves alive with the Spirit Fire and some different Celestial cards we get off of this. We've got Rock Bear and Preparations to give us some units that don't require us to actually play them as actual units. That way that the Researchers can hit other stuff and we still get bodies either way. So this is, again, another big meme deck, but the stats that are going to come out of this deck are going to be real sweet, so I'm hyped to try it out. This one is another Reputation deck, but it is more so than anything a combo deck. We are doing the best we can with this deck to trigger the Reputation purely for the combo. So we're running Glory Seeker and we're running Vi. These are our two main triggers for the Reputation bonus. We've got 3 Bloody Businesses that we can use on the Vi to hopefully help us level the Vi, which would be wonderful, but certainly to make sure that we do get our Reputation bonus so that the discounts happen on our important cards, which is Sigil of Malice and Mimic. Both of these combined, if you have enough copies in hand, you can put a ton of damage onto your opponent's face, and combined with Funsmith, that damage gets duplicated even more. You can go Sigil, 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 Malice, or Mimic, 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 and then Sigil, Sigil, Sigil. It's 9 mana for 12 damage, and with Funsmith, it's 9 mana for 18 damage, as long as this was already on board previous to it. If you do have 13 mana, all the way full mana, you could play this on the same turn and still get that 18 damage off for the cheap. But we still have Mystic Shot and One Get Excited if you really need any other ways to deal damage. The main thing is we're going to try and get Funsmith to stick, and we have 2 iterative improvements to get extra copies of that, but it also has the flexibility of getting us other stuff we might need. The rest of it's definitely going for the draw with the Rummage on the Ignitions, hopefully, and we also have Whispered Words, which should help us find our cards quickly. After Reputation, it'll be very cheap, and beforehand, you can still play it if you really need to. We have the 1 Scorched Earth, because I think landmarks are going to be a little bit of a thing. And we have 2 survival skills, discardable either with the Get Excited or with the Rummages, which can help us keep our Vi alive, since the Vi is so important to the strategy. If we don't get the discounts, it'll be really hard to make this work, I think. But if you do manage to keep her alive with this, that'll be super, super good. It doesn't work on non-damage based removal, but that's really all we can manage in this region combination, so that's what we're going to get. Here we have another take on Reputation Vi. Little bit different. This is all about making the Vi be the big powerhouse that ends up winning the game for you. We got 1 Might, so that we can potentially use her huge attack power just to go through straight to their face. And we have Black Rose Spy to get more Vi's on board, which is the big reason why that is there. We got Whirling Deaths and Bloody Businesses to make sure that you can get lots and lots of strikes. And Whispered Words is the other reputation card in the deck. The rest of it is just getting you there. We have LeBlanc as well. If she does survive, she can potentially get you some mirror images to get you even more copies of Vi, which is super, super sweet. So hopefully we can pull that off. It'll be really nice. And Glory Seeker and LeBlanc are two ways to make the reputation happen before you get the Vi rolling. This is my last LeBlanc deck that I made. I'm actually surprised I ended up running her as much as I did. This one is also a Legion Marauder deck with strength in numbers. The big idea is we do have quite a bit of protection for our units in this. This is probably the best region for LeBlanc, really, because of how squishy she is and how her payoff takes a while to get to. Having Troll Chance, Elixirs is going to be very good. We have one Bloodsworn Pledge. All of this is going to make sure that either the Katarina, the LeBlanc, or especially the Legion Marauders aren't going to end up dead. We have Black Rose Spies to get more copies of Legion Marauders as they get larger. We have one Iceborne Legacy to make them all grow bigger, which is a lot of extra stats. And we have Earn Sign Spirit Walker to turn them all into Overwhelm units to make them into finishers. I think this card is much more solid than trying to run something like the 7-mana spell that gives them all Overwhelm for the turn. This is a ongoing threat that makes them have Overwhelm forever as long as it's on board. They just need to have 5 attack, but by the time you play this and you're going in on it, they're eventually going to be 5 attack pretty quick. Even summoning 2 Legion Marauders off of 1 strength in numbers and attacking with them is already 5 attack, so that's super, super easy to make happen. Katarina lets us attack with them more. It's pretty typical of Legion Marauder strategies, not that Legion Marauder is popular or anything, but normally when it's played it is with Katarina. We have some House Spiders for some blockers. We got Glory Seeker, which I'm putting in basically all of the reputation decks. We have 2 copies of Three Sisters, because in this deck I'd say all 3 of those spells are pretty usable. The Fury is nice, the Flash Freeze is very good on defense, and Entomb is sometimes going to matter. You're probably not going to want to pick it, but there are situations where you would. And I actually have 1 Cold Resistance as a ramp/buff effect. It protects our stuff, and it gets us to strength in numbers faster, which is pretty important for us winning the game. So we get enough Legion Marauders to really get the ball rolling. 2 Bloody Business for some striking, but altogether, this mirror image thing is going to get us even more copies of Legion Marauders. I was almost thinking about doing Blood for Blood, but that didn't end up happening because it wouldn't fit. But super cool meme deck. Definitely going to need to try this one out real fast. It looks really hype. And it's cool that I ended up getting one deck that I think at least this one will make LeBlanc have some sort of payoff. And my last deck is Kahiri's War Mothers. This is all in on Kahiri the Returned. We have only 3 units. We have Chronomancer, we have Psy Scout, and we have Kahiri. That is so that we can make sure we get at least as many predicts as we can off of those so that we can get buffs on Kahiri. Preparations also gives you a predict, so that is 9 predict triggers. You should get at least a few buffs off of that many predictions, given that we do have 3 copies of Kahiri in the deck. The rest of it is Rock Bears for some other tempo with other bodies, because we can't run any other units. And a lot of survivability tools with Ravine, Avalanche, all this kind of stuff. Rite of Negation, definitely pretty important. We got the ramp with the Catalyst. We got one Revitalizing Roar, because if you do grow your Kahiri, you could potentially get a big heal off of this, and that could save you in a pinch. Spirit Fire, good defensively. Howling Abyss, potentially giving us long-term value later in the game. But certainly, you want to be playing War Mother's Call. That's our win condition. It summons Kahiri, and Kahiri shovels another copy of himself into the deck. You're going to get infinite Kahiris. You do not lose anything from playing more War Mothers, because you're getting 2 Kahiris a turn now, and you're never going to lose out on having those. You will always have more of them to pull from the deck, and you will never, ever run out of cards. So once this engine is rolling, it's only a matter of time before your opponent can't deal with the amount of giant Kahiris you'll have. So I think it's a pretty awesome idea for a deck. And again, really excited for this archetype. So that's all the decks. I know it's exhausting to go through 25 decks, but I hope at least some of them excited you and piqued your interest. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Comment down below what decks you are going to be trying, and if any of these decks that work out for you, please let me know. I'm excited to hear about it. And if you would like to see more of my content in the future, please subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one.